What's up, friends? Shane here with Modern Warrior Project, and I just want to knock out a quick video on tampons and gunshot wounds, and do they belong in your first aid kit? First off, let me apologize. I'm driving, so the production value on this is going to be relatively poor, but I wanted to go ahead and knock out this video rather than just put it off on the back burner. I don't think it really needs to be a lot of production value other than the fact it's just me talking to you about it. So, tampons and gunshot wounds. You've probably most likely heard, if you've done any kind of studying or prepping type stuff, you've probably heard that the tampons are a great expedient measure for gunshot wounds, and that's what I want to address specifically in this video. Before I go into that, let me quickly throw out the disclaimers, and I don't even say legal disclaimer, it's a true disclaimer. I am not a medical professional at all, period. Don't come to me for medical advice. I'm going to talk to you about this particular topic because I looked into it, but at the end of the day, it's outside of my field. I've had some basic first aid, life-saving training, if you will, combat lifesaver, some advanced combat lifesaver during my time in special operations. But it's, I'm not a medic. I'm not an EMT, paramedic, or anywhere in that skill level. Just not. However, on this, I have researched it because it was one of the things that I had believed, and I'd heard and believed, and I wanted to check into it more and make sure I'm not just following along blindly on something. And the bottom line is, cutting right to the chase, it's not a good choice. I don't believe it's a good choice, and here's the reasoning behind that. So, let's talk about what a tampon does. A tampon absorbs blood. It doesn't stop bleeding, it absorbs blood, right? That's the whole job, is to prevent blood from the uterus leaking out into the open world during menstruation. It'll absorb, I think it's like 9 grams of blood, something like that. Around a couple tablespoons of blood is what it'll absorb and prevent from spilling out. And of course, if you're shoving that into a gunshot wound, it's going to absorb that, and just having that excess blood-filled tampon is going to prevent a lot of that from leaking out, so it may appear to do a decent job. So let's talk about a couple things here. One, and we'll go into a whole lot of depth in here, but when a bullet enters the body, you're going to have an entrance wound at a minimum, and you may have an exit wound, or it may travel along the body. It can do all kinds of things in there, but normally it's going to create some type of a cavity inside the body as well, and depending on what damage it does in there is going to be the extent of how bad that wound really is. So let's talk about that entrance, where one may be inclined to shove a tampon at in that bullet entry. Most calibers that you're going to get shot with, a lot of those calibers are actually going to be smaller in diameter. The entrance wound is going to be smaller in diameter than the tampon itself. That alone, if you shove a tampon in there, is going to force you to basically make that wound worse. You're going to have to expand that wound to fit the tampon in there in the first place, which is not ideal. Okay, so let's say we get it in there and it appears to stop the bleeding. It looks good and all, but it's not really necessarily doing much for us because there's blood still filling in the cavity, and depending on what happened in there, it really might not be doing anything for us. Because you've got an artery and all these vessels are leaking into that cavity, you're not doing a whole lot. So what we really want to do with a gunshot wound is you need, so first off, depending on where it's at, a tourniquet is a great step. If it's in an area that you can properly use a tourniquet, that's great because you're diminishing the blood supply to the area that's going to be able to escape and come out of circulation of the body. So tourniquets are great. Beyond a tourniquet, if it's in the trunk and other areas, you can't use a tourniquet. What you want best there is some gauze to stop it, which tampon is kind of serving that purpose, but medical gauze would be better. And pressure. Pressure is where it's really going to help minimize some of that damage until you can get the proper treatment going, because pressure is going to squeeze all that in, and it's going to restrict that blood flow as a tourniquet does, not necessarily at the same level. Throwing a tampon in there doesn't do that. So therefore it might mask it and make it look better. It doesn't. I know that I've read before that there's use cases of them using them in previous wars. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't doubt it. However, it doesn't mean that it was the best practice. And especially in now modern times, it's just not. So I don't recommend putting a tampon in your first aid kit unless you, tampon's great to have in your first aid kit for the real reason, feminine hygiene use. You may really need it for some reason, depending on what your kit's for. Also, it serves good for a nosebleed because it absorbs blood, and it's perfectly appropriate to shove it in your nasal cavity to stop the bleeding, absorb the bleeding, if you will. It serves its purpose there. For a gunshot wound, not so much. Although I don't know if I'd rather have a bloody nose or walk around being seen with a tampon in my nose, but that's neither here nor there. So, back to that, the actual gunshot wound. There's a lot of products out there. Quick Clot is a great product, and there's others. And even just gauze that, and I know obviously, I can go to the Dollar Tree and buy a 10-pack of tampons, and it'd be awesome if I could treat 10, gunshot wounds effectively. But if it doesn't do what I need it to do, I'm not really helping myself by putting something in there that's not going to properly treat it. So instead, I'd recommend you save up. One, learn how to treat a gunshot wound well, and save up, maybe for some Quick Clot and, a tourniquet, and have those in your kits that you keep to better appropriately treat a gunshot wound rather than a tampon. I welcome feedback on this, and your opinions, thoughts, and and correction if I'm missing something here. As I said, I'm not a medical professional, but all of this studying has come from numerous sources of reliable, educated people on the topic. So that's my thoughts. I just wanted to kind of share that out there because I think it is a pretty prevalent, what I would say, not good advice as far as tampons and gunshot wounds. Thanks.